Episode 20, Jason.
That's right.
We're 20 in, man. And we couldn't be more honored to celebrate our 20th episode than have the great and powerful Carl Baldassarre here with us today. Folks, thank you so much, Carl, for joining us today.
I'm honored to be here, and I already get the vibe of what you bring to this podcast.
Oh, yeah.
A lot of cheeky humor. I love it.
Oh, yeah. We're a little bit different, I would say, but that's I mean, we like to have fun. That's the whole point of why we're doing this in the first place. But Carl is, just to give them some backstory on you, is I was introduced to him as one of the best Jimmy Page, Led Zeppelin cover guitarists, and I first heard him when I was in the Beachland. I was in the restroom, and I can't remember what song you were warming up to, and I was like, who the hell is just shredding up there? And I just walk in there, and he's just doing a sound check and just effortlessly just destroying. And I was absolutely mind blown. And then we got to talking about some of your other records in your history. And most recently, which is what the focus of today's podcast will likely be, is your solo debut, Grand Boulevard. So congratulations on the release of that. I'm sure that's a long time coming for you, and I can't wait to hear about the creative process behind that. I guess it'd probably be a good place to start. No, Jason?
That's a great place to start, Jake.
Yes. But beyond Grand Boulevard, obviously you've been a musician for 50 years, playing with a few different bands. You are well known as the professor of classic rock on YouTube, which I commend your production quality on your YouTube channel, by the way. I can tell many hours go into preparing and putting together that production, and it is extremely educational, especially from the perspective of another guitarist.
Oh,
So,
really? You play guitar?
Yes,
Yeah,
for 12 years. So
is that right?
That's why I'm like getting a little nervous to nerd out here with you. Man.
Come on now. We'll break out the guitars
Yeah.
later. We'll see.
Yeah. Shit.
Did you bring those?
No, I didn't.
Dude,
I did not.
I have two in my car. I can-
Perfect. Look at that.
All right. Well, that's gonna be behind the scenes footage there.
So are we gonna get into the album right now?
Yeah, I'm ready.
Okay.
Yeah.
So my first question is the album art. All right. So flowers, fading pictures, and geometry. Why?
You know, I have to first of all give credit to the designer, okay, Eric Anderson, who is an incredible talent in Nashville. He's really well known as a photographer. He's done a lot of great big photo shoots, does like Sports Illustrated or whatever. But he is gifted at capturing moments.
Yeah.
And I resonated with him when I met him because he knows how to compose a shot. And as a musical composer, knowing how to frame up notes and sound. You know when you have a great photographer is when they don't have to take that many pictures. It's not through attrition. They just catch moment after moment. Well, he's also gifted as a designer. So in terms of the imagery that's in the album, he took a lot of my sort of sentiments and from my ethos. Yeah. So flowers, geometry, whatever. I mean, I really give credit to Eric, but he just really kind of took the ethos of what I wanted to put out there. Because I have this sort of left brain, right brain thing going. Kind of the math and the music thing always works. So I think he embodied that, and he captured elements of sort of the lightness of being that I really care about, and he brought forth a lot of the energy that I care about.
So what I see in it,
yeah.
I only have one question.
Right.
Okay, so the geometry is very architectural and detailed, like your album is. It seems like you really got into the details of it in your life. The flowers seem more like blossoming, right? So it's your first solo album, so it's like you're starting a new career almost, even though you've been in the music industry for so long.
Right.
Now, the fading, is it fading or is it appearing?
That's so profound. I mean, you're reading into it, which is great because what you're doing is what I hope people do with my music. I'm a believer that my songs and my music isn't complete until the audience inhabits the song, right? And so you're kind of inhabiting the art, and you're bringing your phenomenology, your senses, your experience in the young walk in life that you've had, my young little grasshopper. You're bringing all that to bear. And so you're actually, illuminating me and teaching me. I never really thought about the kind of the fading in and out from an aesthetic person. I just sort of look at it and tell them, yeah, that's exactly what I want. So a lot of the architecture that's in here is Cleveland iconography. So we've got, this is the dome. I'm pointing to this, beautiful kind of Tiffany style glass, which is on, that's in the dome of the Heinen's building downtown.
Wow.
Which used to be the old Cleveland Trust building, which kind of harkens back to sort of some of my business background as well, right? So he kind of built off of that. I took him all around things. I took him to my childhood home, one of my childhood homes, which was my grandparents' home, which was an oasis of stability in an otherwise unstable childhood.
That's great.
And a lot of the flowers and things that he captured were from that garden. So
that's awesome.
So I was very intentional. Like this is my grandparents' backyard, right? And so I wanted a little bit of that, the positive energy from my childhood. And then some of these things are taken around the world. This is in London. I was working at Abbey Road Studios. This is at Kensington Garden in London. There's pictures of me kind of all around in my travels, Scotland and so forth, working with the Royal Scottish Orchestra there for some stuff. So, that's awesome. Tried to kind of make a composite of all of that. It's like a composition, right?
It is.
Yeah, man.
Absolutely.
I'm glad that there was that much thought process going into it, and I do love to see the love given to Cleveland, obviously as a native Clevelander,
right?
And we talk about this a lot. The unknown well of talent in Cleveland is unbelievable. Yeah, and I'm so happy to see someone that's been doing this for a long time still have that same love and appreciation for where they come from. And
I was in Cleveland early on as a young artist from 19 to 22. I had a record contract and really was doing a lot of regional touring back then. But then I really kind of did all my stuff outside of Cleveland, both music and business.
You have to break out of that.
Yeah, and I had my progressive rock band Syzygy really was a lot more business in Europe. We had a #1 album in Germany. So, I'm kind of coming back.
Germany.
Thank you, Germany. Achtung, But so I came back to Cleveland, kind of during COVID and started working from the outside into Cleveland, and
right.
I'd love to be a blessing to this city, and I'd like to be the Sherpa, kind of help lead people, as best I can.
And our generation needs that individual, as many of them as we can have, because most people that have been successful, they can tend to be a little bit like gatekeepers, instead of being, the rising tide that lifts all ships. They're being more counterproductive. Right. And trying to wall off their success from other people. Yeah. So you being the educator and the enthusiast that you are just makes me so very happy.
Yeah. Cleveland, you really appreciate it when you travel the world and then you come back to Cleveland, because then you have a context to compare it to, right?
Right.
So Cleveland in a funny sort of way is a little Paris. It's got the gritty and grandeur. And Paris is just that way. And I know people can snicker at that, but I have to tell you, there is amazing grandeur in Cleveland, both in the arts, and some of the architecture, and some of the beautiful suburbs of Cleveland. And then there is the grittiness, which, Paris has. So it's when you see it in that context and that lens, you have a renewed sort of sense of beauty for it. And Clevelanders and North Coast people, they're a special breed. When you kind of see them when you've been removed from it, you come back. It can be a bit insular, which kind of can hold you back a little bit. But on the other hand, man, there's just no quit. In the 216.
That's right.
So me and Jay kind of have this idea that, Cleveland is now, because you compare it to Paris. We're saying it's almost in a Renaissance age. Yeah. Of like creators and artists that are now coming out of Cleveland.
I'm seeing it. Yeah.
Right? Yeah. And I think that's really, for us to be in it right now.
It's exciting, man.
So exciting.
I know,
and so much fun.
Reconnecting in the city. Recently, I've been making an effort to try to just make connections. I don't have that many connections in Cleveland. So I've been meeting with Mark, from No Cover, and you guys, and a few other people. Just even in the last few weeks, my press agent from New York came into town last week, and she hooked up a bunch of people. And I'm really just blown away what's gathering here.
Yep.
Right. There's something going on.
There's some energy.
There's
an energy. Yeah, and there's a lot of
right now
determinism in the people that I'm meeting. They're really going about this in a very deliberate way.
Yep.
We're sick
and there's a strong sense of community in doing it together that I've seen as well.
Yeah.
There is.
We're sick and tired of New York taking our thunder.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
But
I just want to lean into it with you guys.
Yeah. But let's get back into the album. I have been dying to hear about some of these stories. So you produced a lot of these songs at Abbey Road Studios,
right?
Which is arguably the greatest, most well-known studio in the history of music.
It would be hard to defeat that argument.
Yeah. So I was listening to some of your podcasts and some of your interviews, and I was mind blown by some of these stories. So I wanted to ask you, what was your favorite moment being in Abbey Road? When did you realize that you were sitting in the same chairs as some of the biggest legends of all time, obviously the Beatles? When did that moment sink into you, like, wow, I'm really here, and I need to do something special with this opportunity?
Yeah, there was a couple moments. I would say one kind of lightning bolt moment was, when I first was taken through Studio 2, which is where the Beatles did all of their work, right? And hasn't changed at all, other than the technology they've upgraded. But honestly, the room is the same. They just sweep the floors because they know they have something magical.
Yeah.
The wall coverings are the same. The clock is the same. The door is the same. I mean, I have photos. It's really fun, and I'm going to do a post on this where pictures of me in the studio.
Yeah.
I put them in black and white, and then there's John Lennon in the same spot, and you'll see it's the same floor, everything, because they respect the magisterial quality of the room, and it shouldn't sound as good as it does. I mean, it's this really strange rectangular box that is 2-3 stories tall.
Right.
It shouldn't work acoustically. But the first lightning bolt moment I had was as I was being taken through it before my first session there, and they had John Lennon's piano, right? And it's this little teeny kind of almost a spinet little upright piano, and on the piano, and there's pictures of him playing it, which is like mind blowing, right? And I got to play it. And on the left side of the piano are these cigarette burns from where he put his cigarettes, and I get there and it's like, I'm rubbing these cigarette burns like I'm on an altar of a church and I'm touching a saint's relics.
Right.
Yeah,
as you should.
Right. It's
absolutely.
I mean, okay, give me a moment, because it was insane. I would say, I mean, there was so many I could tell you about, but the other one is then when you hear. So the first sessions that I did there were small string chamber arrangements that I did, classical music chamber arrangements that I did with members of the London Philharmonic and this great conductor, Rick Wentworth, who's got, you can just Google him. But anyways, when I heard them on the downbeat, drop the first notes, and I'm standing in the room with them as they're playing my composition, to hear the sound, honestly, the echoes of Eleanor Rigby came up.
Oh, yes.
I mean, it just, I can't explain it to you, but it sounded so ancient to me, and I can't, I'm here.
But it was so right. It was so very perfect.
Tears are welling in my eyes, and it's my music, but yet it's, music is vibration and energy. Word is vibration and energy. And, second law of thermodynamics, you can't create or destroy it. It's in that room. Remind me to come back to say about Leon Fleischer's take on that concept later. But the reality is that when you hear that and you hear there's this connectivity to the past and the present when you're in the moment, it is overwhelming to be there.
I do want to ask you, coming from, you said your childhood, the way you were brought up, there was some, hard stuff you were brought up through, right? So coming from that to playing, in Abbey Road Studio at John Lennon's, piano,
right? Yeah.
What emotions could you? It's probably almost impossible to encapsulate all of that in one word or a sentence, but if you could, what would you say?
What was that feeling?
What was that feeling? What's the closest thing to it?
When I take in totality my upbringing and that moment and those moments. Let's see. I would say two or three things. One is that the word in the English language that's appropriate for that is ineffable, which is a word that, you know, describes something that you can't put a word to.
Right.
So it was that. So there is no word for it, right?
That's a great new word for me. I'm so happy. Ineffable.
The other thing that's kind of surprising is that I sort of, it's as if I was remembering that experience because my imagination was so vivid because my childhood reality was so miserable that I retreated to my imagination as a child.
Yeah.
And I would imagine everything. And many of these things are continuing to manifest in my life. It was a manifestation of what I had dreamed about. And it was abstract as I was dreaming about as a child. So I felt like I was where I should have been. And it was, as I said, I was remembering something. Yeah. Does that make any sense?
No, it absolutely does. Because there's definitely some connection to like that childhood trauma you go through to becoming who you are. Yeah. And it builds you right there in that moment. So for me, you know, I still have a vision of what I want to be, but I mean, from coming from what you sounds like terrible, but and then you're playing, you know, where the Beatles play. Yeah. As a musician, it's just what was that word? Ineffable. I mean, yeah, I could. I want to feel that. That's you know.
Well, you will. So you just remember that you think things into being.
Right.
You know, we're going in a direction maybe you don't want to go, but
actually, I do want.
The reality of this is about manifestation of ideas, and every great creation started in the mind. Whether it was a locomotive or a skyscraper, they didn't exist until somebody thought about that idea, and then it got manifested from energy up in your consciousness to physical parameters, right? Yep. And so what I'm going to tell you, my young troubadour, is to keep your ideation going and follow it and believe in it, and it will manifest. And you'll be sitting in this chair 40 years from now, and somebody's going to ask you the question, and you're going to understand that, right? How old are you?
25.
You're 25. Okay, so I'm 64. If life is a skyscraper, I'm on the 64th floor, but I was on your floor at one time.
Oh, yeah.
So I understand how this can happen for you. So stay true to your heart, your passion, and your ideas, and they will manifest.
So
that's so beautiful, Carl.
That was what your first song was about, right? Is this positivity.
Which song are you referring to?
You're Gonna Be Right.
Oh, yes. So
You're Gonna Be Right.
Yeah.
So for me, here's what you have done to little old me. All right? So this day and age, you know, our generation, positivity songs like that don't really hit.
Yeah.
Right? So I'm listening to it. At first I'm like, oh, positive stuff. And then I'm like, this is really crazy. So then I sit down, I'm like really listening to it. This is the second time I'm listening to it. This is all today. So I'm listening to it. I'm like, yeah, this is. I think about this stuff too all the time. Anyway, and it was all it. And then listen to the rest of the album. It definitely changed me to like, wow, no, this is a great song. This is almost a glimpse into what the future of music can be too. Yeah. Instead of just
your guard was probably up when you first heard it, and you're saying, and you're like you didn't sense an authenticity about it. But what I'm telling you, all these songs, all these lyrics are all testimonies. Right. So they're coming from a place of truth. I'm not out there trying to preach anything. I don't have anything to preach. But all I can do is tell you my story, and maybe you started to inhabit that notion that so there was testimony to it.
But for me, like that was very because. The other thing is, in my mind, I'm trying to do is, because I want to be, just absorb creation and creative people. So that was a test. Yeah. So I was tested right there of just being like, okay, forget what's cool and what other people think is like, what other people think is cool. What's he saying to you? What are you feeling? Understand what he's trying to, you know, what he's trying to project to his audience and then you go through the album and then you tell your story and it's like, oh my God, yeah, well, and then you go back to that first song. It's like, oh, okay.
You saw it in context because basically the album and even the artwork is a bit of a mosaic.
Right.
Oh yeah.
So you know because when you listen to one, then you all of a sudden we're off into Sands of Tarifa or whatever. We'll probably maybe get on that, but it is. I meant it to be a mosaic, right? But I do want to tell you one other story because I think this is really important. I don't care if we talk about my music. I think this is the Sherpa part of me that wants to
I
make a deposit. You know, in terms of just everybody's health, you know, emotional energy health, you know. And so when I was a child and we were, you know, moving constantly because we never owned a home or a car and never had a home, right? I so badly wanted to have some stability. Didn't really have any, you know, meaningful things in my life, but I had a deck of cards. And I had the deck of cards and I started to build houses of cards with them. And I started to build really massive houses of cards. Like get a second deck, get a third deck. No way. I would build them way out, and each room had a purpose. Which is now I'm just a little chill because I realized Grand Boulevard is really a collection of homes.
This is what Legos were before Legos.
Yes. So, but like, you know, what you believe is what comes true. Right. Okay. And so I was building a home because I wanted a home, and I wanted a big home.
Yeah.
I wanted a home with a lot of different places in it. I wanted the second story, and I learned how to do that. I learned how to make doors with the cards or whatever, because what you believe is what comes true. And then you know, I won't bore you, but I wound up owning homes.
This is good. Yeah.
You know,
this is really
and
good.
it manifested with the little resources that I had.
Right.
Because the power of your mind and your imagination is unstoppable. That's what makes us human, right? And so just believe in that, okay?
All right. That's great.
This guy's about to be motivated after this. Let me tell you something.
I could keep going into more, but let's get a little more into the album.
So more on the fact of it being a mosaic. So one of these things that we've brought this up multiple times at this point, we're sitting there questioning. You know, you have these world-class musicians, whether they be rock stars or pop stars or hip-hop artists, and they continue to make music within one genre. Even though you know they listen to the blues, you know they listen to some country, you know they listen to some classic souls. And I was always like, why don't people jump around a little bit more? Why don't they explore different genres? And me as a musician, that's what I like to do, is to play some rock, play some blues, play some bluegrass, play some country. But I mean, I guess there's restrictions with labels and just logistics and keeping an audience. But Grand Boulevard is, you're playing hopscotch with these genres. You're obviously a master of each of them. And I want to know, when you went into making Grand Boulevard, was this like I have these songs recorded almost and I want to put them together like a mosaic? Or did you have an idea of, I want this to be almost like an exploration of music and sounds and influences? Let me do each song thoughtfully with a different influence, different pacing, different sound, different feeling. Or how was it that it came to be? Because it's obviously a big project and took a lot of thinking through before it was.
Yeah. Well, two thoughts come to mind. One is that the only conceit that I had for the album, the conception of it, was it really was an exercise to try to write short form songs, which is actually really difficult to do, especially when you come from my background, writing progressive rock and writing classical music.
Yeah.
Right.
You get a chance to just empty your creative, you can empty so much, right? And you know, people are accustomed to a 20, 30 minute big progressive rock song, right? You can get away with it sometimes in classical. You have to have a little more form structure there. So I spent a lot of my life infatuated with that kind of music. And what eluded me is writing short form music. So that was the only constraint that I gave myself.
Okay.
The rest of it was, when it came now to the genre jumping that I did, the other conceit that I had for the record was, anything that I do is going to be in service to the song. So whatever the idea was for the song, whether it be lyrical, musical, melodic, whatever, what's the best, I'll use the word voice kind of loosely, what's the best voice and setting, is what they would say in classical music. What's the best setting? What's the best orchestration to allow that message to be transferred most successfully? Sometimes it's reggae. Sometimes it's R&B.
I love the reggae song, by the way.
Sometimes it's heavy rock blues like The Reckoning. Sometimes it's Eastern influence like Tarifa.
Yeah.
That's what I did. I just let it go. And it, as Joan Didion, the great composer, or great literature woman, she said that it unfolds in the writing, and I let it unfold in the writing. And the other thing I think about is when Walt Disney, had this amazing sort of way that he would lead all of his artists and content creators. He would get them in a room, and they'd start storyboarding the next movie, Bambi or whatever it was.
Yeah.
And they'd sketch the little creatures, and they would create the storyboard and post them all up or whatever. And they'd get to a point where they're stuck. Where does the story go? And he said something really profound. And he asked them at one point, pointing to one of the creatures, and he says, what is the want of that character? Personifying.
For Bambi.
Yeah, personifying the character. What's the want? Write that story. So for me, I ask myself when I'm writing a piece of music, what's the want of this song? What does it want? You see, I'm there to serve it, and I'm there to nurture it, because these aren't mine. This gets us to, Leon Fleischer, that the music exists out there already. The vibrations are there.
Oh my goodness.
Okay. And all you got to do is just hitch a ride.
So we're going to get philosophical now. Okay?
Yeah.
Because this is, here we go. We haven't explained this yet. So I have this idea, and obviously you share this idea, that I'm not like a very religious person, but I am somewhat spiritual. And to me, the most spiritual thing that's almost tangible is creative energy. Because as you know, as any artist know, when you're making art in whatever medium it takes form in, you get ideas, you get inspiration, as Rick Rubin calls them. You get these little seeds, right? It almost feels as if someone else just puts it right in your head.
Right.
And that's this kind of that creative energy that you're talking about.
Right.
And hearing you put it from your perspective, it just resonates very deeply within me, because that's how it's happened for me as well.
Yeah, that's so true. And we're basically transmitter receivers. I mean, we're just an amalgam of energy, right? There's energy in every cell in your body and every atom of your body. It's energy. That's all. That's all. Everything is in the cosmos. We're just all, as they say, stardust, right?
Yes.
Energy,
Yes.
right? And so it's really, I think, part of the journey of life. What I found going from where I was to where I'm still trying to get to in terms of just elevating my awareness of this, is that we're just trying to continue to focus our little crystal radios to receive and then transmit the right frequencies. So, I think about music that way. Music, I think, is the most unique art form of all art forms. Now, I'm a little bit biased, right, as a composer.
Absolutely.
But the reality
I don't know, actually.
Well, listen to this. So music is the only art form that physically touches you.
Right.
No. Let me go further.
Go ahead.
The transmission.
Go as far as you want.
The transmission.
Think about as far as you want.
The transmission of sound, the mechanics and physics of that, right? I am talking. I'm disrupting the air molecules, and I'm disrupting the pressures here. That's cascading into your beautiful satellite dish called your ear, right? And that sound pressure is going into your ear, hitting your eardrum. On the back side of that are all of the electrical transmissions. It's basically a microphone pressing on the diaphragm of the microphone, and it gets transmitted to your brain. I am touching you with my music, with my sound. Now, why that's important is a uniqueness to an artist as a musician is that I look at your painting and I turn away. I have a memory, but it's not physically touching me anymore. Right. Music is the only art form that physically touches you. And because of that, I think it's the best medium, and why we have this ineffable experience across the entire globe, no matter what style of music we're listening to.
For the history of humankind.
For the history of humankind, that it's the closest thing to what we are, which is energy.
Yep. You just nailed that one, Carl. I'm going to be honest with you, man. But you're right, because it does incorporate all the visual sensations too as well. It's you're visualizing in your head the scenes that you're painting when you talk about you want people to inhabit your songs, which you very well happens pretty easily when you're listening to Grand Boulevard. But
sometimes they come quickly. I'm gonna just jump to like a song like Lily. You're gonna ask me about how are songs written or whatever. How do you write songs? Right? There's no one way because there's a bunch of frequencies on this radio that we live in. But like Lily, it's like you get your butterfly net out and, and you see it flying, and you go grab it at 2 a.m, and it just is all there. Yeah. The whole thing. The lyrics.
That's so crazy.
The music at 2 a.m. I know exactly where I was sitting in my apartment on an ottoman. I had to get up because there was a glorious disturbance that was going on in me.
Oh, I love how you call it a glorious disturbance.
I had to get up.
I was disturbed, but it was glorious.
Exactly. I had to get up and I had to capture it because I made a lot of mistakes in my youth. Don't do this, by the way.
I have a question.
I'm going to say the mistake though. Don't do this.
Oh, okay.
Is that whenever you want to call it the muse, when the muse knocks, please open the door. Don't say, "Can I get back to you in an hour, 2 hours, or a week?" Another muse may come, but it won't be that same one.
Never.
Like another one would have come, but it wouldn't have been Lily, for example, right? Now, other songs can take 40 years to write, but again, they just happen when they happen. The want of the character, the want of the song.
Again, we talk about that constantly, is capturing that inspiration, letting yourself be open for that muse to not leave that door wide open.
Yes,
quite
answer
honestly.
the door
always,
and stop and drop what you're doing. What else is more important?
Especially with songwriting, is I've taken more of a intentional, thoughtful approach to actively writing music, and about half the songs that I've written so far, or as of in the last couple months, they've came when I'm trying to go to sleep.
Yeah.
Like I'm literally in bed, lights out, I'm going to bed, and I get one line will just pop right into my head, right? I have to roll over and I have to write it down.
That's great.
And what happens when I do that, I write one line and I go back to bed. I'm like, okay, time to go to bed.
That's
great. And you're like, well, what if, and then you got another one. And then you're like, boom, now you just got half a song.
Right.
And you just got to wake up and write the chord progressions and throw a couple new melody lines in the background and you got a song.
And you got it.
And it's just so crazy how it just like flushes out and all you have to do is answer the door and it's there.
Yep. Yeah.
It's really so beautiful.
And the more, and I realize, because I go into these cycles of being super creative and then getting a little more kind of practical. Like right now, I'm kind of playing all the music live. And so it's hard for me to stay in that creative kind of monastic vibe where I just shut everything out. But when I started writing Grand Boulevard, my goal was I'm going to write the great 8. I call it the great 8. I want to write 8 great songs. I want them to be like 3 minutes long. I'm going to force myself, write the great 8. Well, 71 songs later... because I kept answering the door. Yeah. Guess what? When I answered the door one day, they kept knocking.
Right.
Yeah.
More came, because I was just doing that. I was just focused on doing that, answering the door.
Is that not the best?
Here's my thing though too about that. So you could have still did the 8 great songs though too, because I think that's how creativity works. Is it gives you have to take all these options. Right?
Yeah.
So 71 options.
Yeah.
7 plus 1 is 8, by the way.
Yeah.
Did you notice that? That's pretty sweet.
Well done. Bravo. Did you know I'm 2 to the 6th power years old? I'm 64. Okay,
that's 8 too.
We'll try to. Oh,
Geometry.
We just hit an 8. I like it.
It's another 8.
All right.
I'm a big 9 guy.
All right, let's do this.
All right. But
you know the inverse of every musical interval adds to 9. So if I'm playing a major second, if I play the major second above, if I play a 7th below, it's the same interval because they add to 9. Wow. A perfect 4th above becomes a perfect 5th below. F above C is a 4th. Yeah. F below C is a 5th. They all add to 9. So if you like 9s.
3, 6, 9.
If you like 9s.
Damn, she fine. But Nikola Tesla had like this theory that 3, 6, and 9 were like... the numbers of the universe. So everything he did.
Interesting.
He really went into it. Like everything he did had to end in a 3, 6, or 9.
Oh, that's cool.
But so the creativity of getting you got it. You got 16 great songs out of it.
Yeah.
You couldn't. Yeah. That's where like you couldn't. I can't. I'll put it in.
Well, it sounds like you have more than just Grand Boulevard.
Yeah, that's what I had to do. But they started to come out, and I said, okay, we'll gather you over here. You'll be classical. We'll gather you over here. You'll be progressive rock. We'll put you here, and everything was left over. So I'm like, well, these are the Grand Boulevard songs.
Yeah.
Because this embodies me as a composer. I think you mentioned about some artists. Most artists commercially are going to focus in, which you should. I mean, commercially, that's the best advice to do.
Right.
You know what I mean? It's smart. And plus you can, there's a lot of benefits to doing that. It's commercial suicide to do what I did, right? To have all these different sort of voices speaking.
that's what I love.
Oh, that's cool.
I love
I'm grateful
suicide.
that I'm in the right place right now.
That's an album right there.
Yeah.
An album name or an art show name. Possibly.
But when I look back on it, I look at this collection of what became Grand Boulevard. Yeah, I think these stories kind of hold together, as different as they are.
Yeah.
I mean, whatever energies come through this universe just doubled what you really wanted, and that's awesome.
That's cool.
You can't ask for anything better than that, right?
I appreciate it.
Yeah.
So let's talk about Jimmy Page. Just touch on it a little bit as a guitarist.
Sure. Yeah.
Why was it Jimmy Page that you decided to devote a very large portion of your life to covering his songs, playing them for other people, letting his spirit and talent live on through you?
Yeah.
Obviously with your own grace and flair. But why was it Jimmy?
Yeah. Well, two things. One is that I was very impressionable when I first heard him. So
Sure.
I was lucky to have my late stepsister. She was 7 years older than me. So in '64, she was like 13, whatever, and introduced me to the Beatles when I was only 5, okay? And then she goes off to college in '69, '70, right? So I'm like 10 years old or whatever it was. She comes home from her first semester, brings home a platter of vinyl records.
Oh, baby.
And she says, "You've got to hear what I just heard." It's the
Yeah.
summer of love,
Yeah.
And she starts dropping discs, man. And the first one that she dropped was Led Zeppelin 2, which had just come out a little earlier. She dropped the needle on side 2, track 1. It was Heartbreaker. And I'm this like kid in 6th grade. I'm hearing this sound, this animal. And then all of a sudden I hear that middle breakdown where he's just blowing on the guitar. I don't know what happened. I don't know what happened to me when I heard that. It was the beginning of my delinquency. It was the beginning of everything. It was so incredible. That's part of it because it happened at the right time. Everybody had that kind of moment, I'm sure, right?
Oh, yeah.
That was the time for your calling.
Yeah, it
That was
is.
the time it was like, hey,
yeah,
you're ready.
And so I think the other
ready.
thing about what I evolved to appreciate, and still to this day, I think, is the totality of what Jimmy Page is as an artist. And I really apprehend him as literally a physical artist. I mean, he went to art school or whatever. And I can see through the lens of what he is as an artist and how he expresses himself. I understand the choices he makes musically, compositionally, production-wise, album cover design, business-wise, the strategy of Led Zeppelin. He had a strategy before they started. It was brilliant. He's just brilliant. And he's just a conductor in a way. And so I look at the totality of them, and like a lot of people just look at the playing, put your finger here or whatever, but I don't look at it that way.
You look at it very much from a compositional standpoint.
That's necessary, but that ain't sufficient to get it right in my estimation.
No.
Now I had a knack for it, for the Jimmy Page style, because he's an impressionist painter, where people hated impressionist artists like Monet and Renoir because it was gross and the brush strokes were brutal and whatever, and they were completely destroyed by the critics. As it's Page's picking style is, because he has kind of an inarticulate, or so you would say, but if you look at it through the lens of a Renoir and you step back, you realize that, oh my gosh, this is a thing unto itself.
Yep.
Now, as a guitar player, if you play a lot of Jimmy Page, it can impair you to play most any other style of guitar, because there's this built-in sort of artifacts that you have to get with the guitar, and it can make you sloppy in other areas, okay? But I happen to be blessed to have a knack to play them. It was an early little parlor trick that I used to do as a kid to play that stuff, and people's jaws would drop, right? So it's become my parlor trick.
Awesome.
So it's always been a go-to thing for me. Even when I was touring with my first band, Abraxas, I would drop in a Jimmy Page thing at the end of that, and people would just, so it's good for business.
For sure. Absolutely.
But I love it because I connect to it, because it identifies with me. That's my 11-year-old Carl in that moment. It's still there, man. That vibration's still going.
Oh, that'll
Those
leave,
vibrations.
Yeah.
It will never leave.
No.
So
that's the Jimmy Page thing.
That leads to the more important question. Who's the best guitarist of all time?
That's impossible to answer.
Yeah.
It's you'd have to. I guess if you were going to try to crack that one, you'd have to break it down into genre. Yeah. And then it'd still be impossible. We could throw some names out by genre, but I can tell you from influences by genre to me, but you can never say the greatest, because again, music's an art, not a science. So what's great to you is not great to me. So that's a cop-out answer for you right there.
I mean, it's the right answer though, because to me it's always been a mixture of that. It's always been subjective, obviously, but it's always been like Like nowadays, you have people that could play note for note exactly how Jimi Hendrix played. Right?
Yeah.
Exactly.
Right.
They didn't come up with that though.
Right.
Right.
Yep.
So there's the people that just have the technical prowess, but then you have the pioneers of even back as far as like a Robert Johnson, who just is such a legend, had such a profound impact on the sound of music from that era.
Yeah.
That's what makes them one of the legends, one of the greats. It's not always just like, to me, the best blues guitar player could easily be B.B. King, but I've always loved Stevie Ray.
Yeah.
He's always been one of my favorites.
Yeah.
Honestly, Jimmy Page, Jimi Hendrix have always been up there. I'm a huge blues guy, so I'm very partial to that.
As he wears a Billy String shirt.
Yeah, right. Yeah.
I'm not gonna let you cop out though, Jake. Who is the best guitarist in your head?
In my head?
Yeah, you can't cop out.
I have to say Stevie Ray. I'm not gonna cop out.
There it is. We'll see.
Well, that's good. I mean, that's important to you, and it speaks to you.
Oh, yeah.
Who am I to tell you that that's not important, that that's not the best guitar player then for you, as you bring your entire being to experiencing that. You said something that was intriguing to me about you casted a distinction between those that are the pioneers, or those that are the first on the scene that make the impact, and then there's people that maybe emulate them. If I could comment on, I think a lot about what is the meaning of originality, right? And I follow the kind of the arc that a lot of creators will take. That you start out in life often, kind of copying somebody, right? And then you start to the next level is start to emulate them, where you're not copying note for note, but you're emulating the aspects of what they do.
It's like a mentorship.
Yeah,
that's exactly right.
I said that's what Michelangelo did.
Yeah. Well, I'm going to get to that. Okay, so there's two more levels. Those two more levels, right? And then you get to kind of the creative mode, where you're actually starting to create some things, right? And where your inspiration and your originality combine, that's where you get kind of, creative. And then the last thing, I quote Igor Stravinsky, the great classical composer. He was being interviewed back in the 50s. There's a funny YouTube footage of him talking about this on TV. And the interviewer said to him, so, Mr. Stravinsky, you are a composer. And he stopped and he goes, not composer, inventor of music. Inventor.
That's an awesome line.
Yeah, and so
awesome
so that's the last thing when you invent something. That's the highest form you can be. So when you start mentioning the names of these greats, whether they were blessed to be gifted, but also their timing was good to be the first there. When you invent something, and we can argue what that means, but when you're there, pretty much you're going to be in the list of greatest of all time.
Totally.
Right?
Yeah.
So a lot of those people are there that really, they were the inventors of something that happened.
That's a great point. That's exactly right.
Sorry, I need to take that one in.
Yeah, that was...
that's like, because for me, doing a lot of my art, it's, a lot of people keep trying to sway me to do, something similar to everyone else, and it's always very similar. Like, oh, do this just so you could sell something, and I'm always been the way of, no, I want to create something, and like you just said, like invent something new, and that's that's the path I feel like I've taken,
and that's also the hardest path to take, right?
Well, don't forget though. Let me.
I love it.
Let me help free you. Let me help free you from something. May I?
Yeah, go ahead.
Okay, so trying to do something that nobody else has done, good luck, okay, because that doesn't exist. Because every great inventor of music stands on the shoulders of somebody that came before them. See, all Beethoven wanted to do was just be a better version of Haydn, right? So all Haydn wanted to do is just be a better version of Mozart, right? So in other words, you can stand on the shoulders of those. Because if you're going to go out there now, especially in the modern era where everything has been, it seems like everything's been done. It's the amount of white space is almost gone.
Right.
But the way that's only if you're looking at things two-dimensional, looking for white space. But if you look three-dimensionally and go up, standing on the shoulders of something and find your invention there, that's perfectly cool.
So I definitely,
so don't run away from tapping into things that are great. Just make them great.
That's what I have to do.
Every artist has done that.
But that's what I have to do is, so I look at a Michelangelo, Leonardo da Vinci, then I look at like a Mark Rothko, Andy Warhol, Michael Jean Basquiat, and all these other, artists that have made it big. And then I take all that, like what you said is you kind of copy them at first.
Right.
And then you have, then you have that in the back of your mind when you're creating something, trying to create something different and new.
I mean,
and it all comes together.
I mean, if you look at an amalgam, if you look at Warhol and Steve Jobs,
right,
the one thing they have in similar is that they didn't actually create anything. They took what existed and put it together in a different way.
Yeah.
Right? Like Steve Jobs, he didn't invent the phone. We had a phone, right? He didn't invent plastic. He didn't invent wire.
He didn't invent the touch screen.
He didn't invent that, right? But his genius was in how you amalgamate it. Standing on the shoulders of other, the vision comes in the amalgamation.
He cared about, what was behind the dresser. So I read his book, and then you said that, and I was like, "This is
Well, I met his second in command, and he told me that story,
awesome.
and that's changed my life.
Yeah,
I carry about finishing the back of the drawer.
His dad told him that. Yeah. His dad told him that at a young age, and it just stuck with him forever. Which is, it's very true. You have to be, in a world that we live in too. Again, with everything being so quick and fast, and people not really taking their time on things. It's almost the better route is to breathe, take your time, let it develop. But nobody wants to take that route because it's the harder route. But that's why great things come out of that route, that path. Yeah. And I enjoy taking my time with things.
Great.
So
bless you for that. That's awesome.
And I can see with this album too that
it's been a life journey to get to that.
It's incredible too because I have the other question of because my idea was also to learn a bunch, and I don't care what age I'm at to really start creating something. And I feel like that's what your rebirth is just a motivation or an inspiration to me of just like, okay, I have time. I have time to just figure things out. And it's very, it's very inspirational to me.
That's one of the pieces of advice I do give to people when I look back in terms of regret. I have probably squandered way too much time. And I just tell you, just don't waste time, know? And I even have a note that's on my little writing desk at home that I wrote to myself on a little post-it, and I said, if what you're about to do is not contributing to your dream or your...
Right.
Why are you doing it?
Absolutely.
So I got to have an answer. If I'm not actually working on something right now that's contributing to whatever this is I want to do, there might be a legitimate answer to it. But a lot of times, I'm human too, ADD, I'm and I have to recenter myself sometimes. So at least I'm working towards a direction of something.
It's funny how my brain works too. And I feel like this is how everyone's brain works kind of is it will develop a reason. Oh, you're doing this because of this. You're just doing it. It's not a true, it's like, well, no, you need to be doing this, Yeah. But I just think that's funny and interesting too. But thank you for inspiring me too.
No, you're welcome. You inspire me too.
Oh, thanks. Right.
Yeah. You do.
Thank you.
Off topic, I guess a little bit, but have you considered writing compositions for film?
I have.
That's a great question.
Because a lot of the sound in Grand Boulevard, the two that I was like, I feel like this is already in a movie. Is Love Never Dies and Sands of Terrifies. I was like, he could so easily convert this talent into just writing an entire original soundtrack for a movie.
So I actually
or theater.
Yeah, so I have done that. But again, I've written them without having the placements yet. But I've got an album that's not released called Studio 2, which is the name of Abbey Road Studio 2, and all the classical music. And I wrote them all very visually, purposely for different moods and so forth like that. But they stand on their own as a track. I really love that you picked up on that because, again, I visualize things as I'm writing every one of these stories, and so they could be set to stage or to film, and I can't help it because that's how I think in a really tangible way, and I try to manifest that through the music. Now, I've been blessed to be trained by some really great musical teachers, and they've imbued me with whatever skills that we can have in terms of the curriculum to actually do that intentionally. There's something called drama and music, and you're able to, like, if I wanted to write a youthful song about love, I have a couple tools as a composer that I can use. One is tempo, because young love is going to be a little faster tempo, a little bit impatient, right? I can get to the home chord much quicker. Then I might have deceptive cadences if I'm writing about mature love. It might be a slower tempo, right? There might be a waltz meter to it, right? I also might write the melody for your song with a much higher melody on the right-hand side of the piano. I might write it for a more mature voice on the left-hand side of the piano to show some age. So in other words, you can, there's so many tricks as a composer, right, that you can use. And all the great film composers know these tricks, right? And they're taught to a certain extent in some conservatories, which I was blessed to study with a great teacher there. But you can be given these tools, and so they don't get you there 100%. But there are ways to kind of, and so I love that stuff because I bring it into the music.
We're so
and
big on that
every
stuff.
one of these songs, I bring drama and music, knowing what I'm trying to create. Right? If I want some anxiety, I'm creating these really, really close intervals, you know, these little minor seconds. You can't get any shorter than that in tonal music. I want things to rub up against each other, right? You know, if I want more peace and serenity, I'm going to create more open harmonies. If I want someone who's not so certain about where they are, what they're going to be, or what they're going to do, I won't put a major third in there, because the third of a chord declares if you're happy or sad. A major third is going to give you a positive conclusion. A minor third, whatever. If I leave the third out and I just have fourths and fifths, we think called quartal and quintal chords, I don't know where you stand, these sus chords, right? You don't know where you're at. So you can use those things to create, like, this person doesn't know where they're at, they're confused, right? You can use all of these tools to embody the character, the want of the character in the song.
That's so beautiful.
I
mean, that's
the image I just got. I can use that almost in anything we do.
Yeah.
Creative wise.
This is an example of a very deep understanding of music theory, and everything, like, and more importantly, human emotion, right? How we perceive these things.
Yes.
This is what we are very much working towards, and like you said, there are those tools that we're taught, right? That foundation. But one of the things I wanted to ask you too was, as a musician, how important is it to know music theory, and then break the rules once you do learn it? Once your brain works in that way, like, okay, this is how music is connected, these are the rules, quote unquote, now how can I break them to do something that's completely original?
Yeah, well, first of all, you don't need to know music theory if you're not wired for it, right? And so, you know, the Beatles didn't know music theory, okay? But they had something as even better. They had intuitive sense of connection. They had to write beautifully memorable songs because they didn't have the money to buy tape recorders. So they weren't going to write any songs they couldn't remember.
Right.
And they're writing hundreds of songs, and so they had to remember the tune. They had to remember whatever. So that's
so crazy.
They wrote catchy things because they needed to. So they would remember it, right? By necessity, they became creative geniuses. Now, as they've come along, I've seen McCartney, and he has a certain understanding, because you'd pick up trade know-how. There's trade know-how, and then there's proprietary, kind of call it, music theory, whatever, that you can be taught. But there's no substitute for living an observed life and accumulating through the compound interest function of time, accumulating this trade know-how. It's always going to win, in my estimation. But I happen to be wired in a way with this left brain, right brain thing, where I love music theory, and I wind up being oppressed by knowing too much. They're tools to me. They're just tools, right? They're not rules. They're tools. It rhymes, but they're not the same, right? Yeah. And in terms of breaking the rules, absolutely, right? There's only two types of music. There's good and bad to you, right? Whatever's good for you. And you just follow that. That's all. If it works for you, it works for you.
I love to hear that. That makes me feel more comfortable that I don't know music theory very well.
But I always tell people, the organizing principles of music theory, if you have a bent for wanting to organize yourself and not fish around as much, because there's a certain sound, like, this when this chord goes to this chord, it's a, in movie music, a lot of times there's this thing called tertian movements, which happen. They're movements of a third, and they have a very distinctive sound. You might stumble on it and not know why it's there, and then the next time, I wanted that sound. And you're flipping around on the guitar or the piano, like, I want that sound. If you know if these things have names, you can get to them. So it makes it more efficient, right? Because the tool has a name, you just go grab the tool. If you don't know the tool name and you got to fish around to find it, it could take a little more time. But maybe a happy accident occurs, and all of a sudden you find this other thing. Like,
happy accidents.
I love that stuff. It happens all the time, because I'm not a great piano player, although I write a lot on piano. half the great ideas I get is because I'm just fingering things accidentally the wrong way. I go, whoa, what was that? Stop! Don't move your hands. I got to write down those notes. You know, it's crazy, right?
Yeah. No, one of my favorite artists right now is John Mayer. I think he's just extremely underrated as a songwriter, as a guitarist, especially. Mm-hmm. But he talks about like you got to go play. You got to forget everything and just just dance around in the dark and see what you can find and just constantly do that.
Amen.
And the things you'll find can just be amazing.
Yeah.
And I love to do
I agree. That. I totally agree.
So what are some learning techniques, though, that you've used over or figured out over the years to kind of, I guess, I want to say learn quicker, but I know we just talked about, taking time to learn too.
Yeah.
But like, is there things to help you be more efficient at learning, something like music theory?
Oh, so okay. As it relates to music theory,
right.
When you're doing anything that has that's more structured, and music theory is very structured, just like any kind of STEM is, right? You can't take biology 2 unless you have biology 1, right? So like any great curriculum in anything in school, it's all about the layering of it, right? We're talking about your layers, right? Okay. So it's all about, you got to have the first layer before you put the second layer on, So what happens a lot of times where, you want to jump ahead sometimes in music theory. I want to get to polychords or whatever, but you don't even know intervals, You can do that, you'll crumble, but it'll be okay. You'll still pick up a few things.
You learn from there and then you come back.
So I would say, the best way to do it is just trust in the curriculum of it and just kind of build it up. But go ahead, jump off the deep end, man. Just go. If you want to go to bitonal harmony, jump into try and get yourself through it. It doesn't hurt. There's no harm that's being done. But the best way to study something is to do it in kind of that structured layering way, right? The other thing to do, is just good habits. Don't waste time. Have a time set aside where and even you can learn so much in 5 or 10 minutes. When I was like running around the business world trying to write progressive rock music, but living that, it was like 15 minutes at a time, but I was writing epic music, but it was only at 15 minutes at a time. You can actually get stuff done in a dedicated 15 minutes of time, right?
6.
It just compounds.
Division of 3 or
divisible
by 3.
There you go. Right? So just be deliberate, that's all,
That's okay. I love that because that's something like I struggle with too, is I will jump ahead.
That's okay.
Just because like I feel like, okay, I need to figure this out now, this area.
And that seems more fun.
Yeah.
Yeah, that's wonderful.
A little chaos never hurt anyone.
That's wonderful. Yeah, right. And it's delightful when you go back and you start filling in the missing bricks of the structure.
And you're like, ooh, maybe I could have used that.
Yeah. That's always the thought. Well, I definitely could have used that. I wish I would have known that before.
I always teach people who are musicians that have been playing for a number of years and have very limited music theory, and they start getting excited about being able to get tools to say, that's what that is. And I'll say it's like you have a closet, right? And over your life you accumulate a lot of clothes, but they're not on hangers. They're just in the bottom of the closet. So what I'm helping you do is we're now going to put them up on hangers, and the shirts are going to go here, the pants are going to go. I'm just organizing your closet. You got a lot of good clothes down there. Let's just organize it for you.
Come on,
know where they're at.
I just need my clothes hung up. That's all I ever needed in life.
Your shirts are,
my closet's just been a mess my whole life.
We're just tidying it up so you know where everything is and what they're called.
It goes into another thing that me and Jake have talked about, not really on I was gonna say on air. We're not on air.
No, we're on air.
On pod, but the learning structure of schools nowadays too, or in school in general. It never meshed with me.
He's got big beef with education.
Major beef with education because I feel like they've always. I get the structure part, but why isn't it that they like what I like to do is like I said, like I jump ahead and then come back. Mm-hmm. Why do they try to make me start from the beginning and then I get that.
I think
now I get it.
I think that's a much bigger, longer conversation. To what Carl's point is once you've identified that one thing that you're very passionate in, that you want to learn, it's not like generalized education. It's I want to learn music theory. I want to learn impressionist painting. Then that's when you take the structured approach, because then all it is you're just driven by your own passion,
right? And
you're just trusting the curriculum. It's not that the curriculum is bad; it's just that it's not personalized to those individual people, right?
Right.
Okay.
Yeah. I think not to digress, but I think it also is a bit of an artifact of how it was in
absolutely.
historic times, where where we had kind of master teacher student kind of model, and there was a transference of this information, and it was done by step, as a recipe oriented, and so that sort of stayed. And there is, again, truth to the layering of knowledge. Right. So you take mathematics, and then you get algebra 1, you get algebra 2, and then you get calculus, because you can't get to calculus and derivatives without knowing basic mathematics, right, and algebra. So there is a logic to that. I get it, but it's not, you just follow your path and do the best you can, and trust in that. Yeah, and you can always go back, and everybody can be educated. You can find education.
That was like, for me, that again, like, that was one of the biggest things or almost epiphanies I thought of, is I can always go back to school. I've never been the guy to be like, oh, all my friends are doing it, so I have to do it. It's never,
it's infinitely more valuable to go to school when you know for a fact what you want to go there for.
I did the same thing. I mean, my first recording contract when I was 19, I was out on the road touring I didn't go off. All my kids from high school, I had such a screwed up childhood. They were doing their thing. I went off, and I did feel bad when they were getting degrees. Back then I'm thinking, like, what am I doing, with my life, whatever, and but eventually I got it all done. I did all that stuff. I made more money smiling than I ever did with any degree anyway. So
I mean, it feels like the value of a degree is like gone down a lot.
Be joyful.
Though. Yeah. That's so true.
What? Go ahead. No, you go.
No, you go.
No, you go. Go ahead.
I'm gonna put a bow on it.
Okay, put a bow on it, but I have a question.
Well, ask your
No, it's going to be a longer conversation, though.
Go ahead.
We'll go next time.
All right. So it's very clear to me that your best years as a musician, as a composer, are right now and still ahead of you.
Yay! Thank you.
Are yet to come.
I mean, your creative energy is just it's crazy. It's crazy, and the fact that you have the way you just say, you're like, okay, these songs are just flowing. There's so much. I have multiple albums that still have to come out. There's so much more work to be done.
Yeah, I'm really excited about my future. I'll tell you one last thing really quick.
Yeah.
So when I turned 60, I was slow to get out of bed because and I don't normally care about this stuff, but I was having a little pity party. I'm 60. Yeah. Oh, geez. And I was thinking about, like, God, I'm not really happy with my life or whatever. What have I done? This, that, and the other. And I started thinking about other people, like people I know that maybe had better situations than I had, maybe better relationships or better, jobs or whatever, you name it. You know how we get in those moments sometimes, right? And you start comparing. So I went through them all, and I started thinking, no, I wouldn't want to be that person. No, I wouldn't want to. And I started thinking about, like, my heroes, like Jimmy Page or, Beethoven or whatever, And it's the funniest thing happened. All of a sudden, it hit me. I'm more excited about my future than somebody else that already has their future. I leapt out of bed like I was 19. I still feel that way. I've always felt that way. I'm still 19 years old. The best is yet to come. I'm hell-bent to make sure it happens.
Let's go.
And get out of my way.
I love
that. That's a theory I have for myself, too, and I had this a lot older than you. You were so young when you had that idea, is why not be your own hero? Why you have all these other heroes you're looking up to. It should be, they should inspire you, but you should be your own hero. And what would that look like to you?
That's a nice thing, because then you would actually love yourself more. Right. Because that's what heroes do, they care for people and stuff.
And I feel like, you become, and then, like you said, this vision and ideas of yourself become more, I guess, profound when you become what you want to be. That's the best
Absolutely. Person. Last thing I'll tell you, the most important mantra I have to leave you with is design a life that you love. And I'm going to repeat that, okay? Design a life that you love. And what I've learned the hard way, that if you don't design a life that you love, someone's going to design it for you, and you're not going to maybe even realize it. People will use you and design your life for you. Sometimes it'll be for good but bad. But you are the grand designer of your life, or the hero, as you say. And the other key, that's the most important word of that sentence, is design. To me, the second most important word is you. And then the third most important word is love, because you can't love unless you have a positive, purposeful design for your life. In the fullest way, you can't love.
I can't agree more.
You can't love unless you love you to start with, right? So design a life that you love. Always recenter yourself with that notion, and you're going to do just fine.
That's amazing, Carl.
Amazing. Thank you so much. Everybody, this has been Carl Baldassarre, the creator of Grand Boulevard, the album that is out now. And this has been Wit and Wisdom.
This has been Wit and Wisdom.
Ta-da!
Okay, real quick, can we do an after show?